Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. At 4:50 a.m., fists pounded on Owen Merritt's door. Not criminals, not cops, the HOA. What followed wasn't a dispute, it was a siege. Forged leases, fake fines, and a plot to steal his home, but they picked the wrong man. This isn't just a neighborhood thriller, it's war on paper. They started pounding on my door at 4:50 in the damn morning. Not knocking, pounding. Fist meets wood kinda pounding. I jolted awake like I'd been yanked from a foxhole, half expecting to hear gunfire next. My old instincts kicked in fast. I was on my feet, moving through the hallway in the dark, bare feet silent on cold hardwood, hand already under the staircase lip where I kept my holstered Glock locked in a biometric box. Not because I expected trouble in my sleepy corner of suburban Colorado, but because I'd been trained for worse, and some habits die hard. I cracked the front curtain just a hair. Porch light off, but I could make out 3 figures on the porch. 2 men in matching navy windbreakers, and 1 woman holding what looked like a folder and a clipboard the size of a pizza box. Great. Bureaucrats. Government? No. The logo on the folder told me everything I needed to know. Canyon Creek Trails HOA. I exhaled sharply. This wasn't war. This was worse. This was homeowners. I unlocked and opened the door exactly 3 inches. You've got about 5 seconds to explain why you're beating down my door before I consider that trespassing. The woman stepped forward like I wasn't even holding the threshold. Blonde bob, pearl earrings, blazer over pajama pants, power casual, HOA edition. Mr. Merritt, I'm Karen Sheldon, president of the Canyon Creek Trails Homeowners Association. We're here to serve a formal notice of lease expiration. I blinked. You're what? One of the guys, clipboard lackey number 1, held up a laminated sheet like he was playing courtroom. Across the top, in bold caps, Notice of Occupancy Termination, HOA Section 13. I swear my brain had to reboot just to keep up. Lease expiration, I repeated. This is my house. I own it outright. Karen clicked her tongue like I'd spilled wine on her rug. Mr. Merritt, according to our records, this residence, Lot 117A, was leased from Canyon Creek Trails HOA under a fixed-term residential agreement initiated 3 years ago. That term ended at midnight. Under Section 13.7, the premises must now be vacated. I stared at her, then at the paper. I was fully awake now, but this still felt like some kind of fever dream. Lady, I bought this house 3 years ago in cash, with full title transfer and deed registration. I have no lease with you. I've never signed anything with your HOA because I'm not in your HOA. I'm outside the zone. That was the damn point. Karen adjusted her glasses. Perhaps there's been confusion. The document bears your signature. Then it's forged, I said flatly. You'll need to vacate voluntarily, or we'll be forced to initiate formal removal procedures under Civil Code and HOA regulations. That's when she stepped back and pulled out her phone. I'm calling the police. I almost laughed. You're calling the cops on a man inside his own home because you hallucinated a lease? She didn't answer. She was already dialing. 20 minutes later, red and blue lit up my front windows. A sheriff's cruiser pulled up, tires crunching gravel. I kept calm. I'd been on the receiving end of worse standoffs. The responding officer, Deputy Cullen, I later read on the name tag, knocked politely and asked to speak with me and Karen separately. Karen gave him her little folder. She'd printed it all fancy, with fake contract headers and a table of infractions going back months. I heard phrases like refused compliance and deterioration of community aesthetic standards. It was like HOA Mad Libs. When it was my turn, I gave Cullen the simple version. Name's Owen Merritt, former JAG attorney. Bought this house 3 years ago, cash, recorded deed, full county documentation, not inside HOA jurisdiction. That woman's trying to strong-arm me with forged documents. He scratched his beard. You have proof of ownership. I walked him to the office, pulled out the manila file, title insurance, closing docs, digital time-stamped deed with the county seal. All of it legit. To his credit, Cullen didn't make any snap calls, but he did say the words I hate the most. This may be a civil matter. I wanted to punch drywall. She showed up at my house before dawn with fake eviction papers and tried to remove me from my own home. I understand, sir, Cullen said, hands up. I'll write up an incident report and file both claims, yours and hers. But if they file documents, you'll need to challenge them in court. Until then, we can't forcibly remove her unless she enters the property. Karen, of course, was standing smugly in the driveway, like she'd won a custody battle. "We'll see you in court, Mr. Merritt," she said sweetly. "Do pack soon." When they drove off, HOA goons and all, I stood in my doorway for a long time. I wasn't just angry, I was calculating. This wasn't confusion. This was a hit job. Legal, deliberate, rehearsed. I'd seen this kind of maneuvering overseas when corrupt councils tried to grab abandoned properties with fake signatures and forged documents. But this wasn't Baghdad. This was Colorado, and they just picked the wrong veteran to screw with. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. I sat in my office with a pot of black coffee, the deed spread out in front of me like it was a battle map. Every few minutes, I'd glance at the porch camera feed, half expecting Karen to show up again with a damn moving truck. She didn't. But by 7 a.m., I'd already made calls to the county assessor's office, my realtor from 3 years back, and a title attorney I knew from my JAG days. If they wanted to turn this into a paper war, I'd stack the bodies high. By 9, I was downtown at the El Paso County Clerk and Recorder's Building. I requested certified copies of every document tied to Parcel 117A. The clerk, a woman named Tasha with sharp nails and sharper eyes, raised an eyebrow when I told her why. "They filed something this morning," she said, checking the terminal. "Application to revise lot classification from Canyon Creek Trails HOA. Submitted at 5:42 a.m. I stared at her. "They tried to change the zoning before the sun came up." "Looks that way." She printed the request. Sure enough, at the bottom was Karen Sheldon's digital signature, and under it, an attached lease agreement allegedly signed by me in 2022, stating that I was renting the property from Canyon Creek Trails HOA for a fixed term of 3 years. I couldn't decide what insulted me more, the handwriting or the fact that they listed my old P.O. box in San Antonio as my current legal address. They were sloppy, but they were also fast. By 10:30, I had the documents, notarized copies of my original deed, and a folder thick enough to kill a rabbit with. I drove straight to the sheriff's department to file an official report. Attempted real estate fraud, harassment, falsification of public records, and criminal trespass. The officer at the desk gave me the same tired look I used to give green jags walking into field hearings with trembling folders. "We'll open a case," he said, "but this'll probably go civil unless there's clear criminal intent." There is. Trust me, she's not confused. She's orchestrating. He nodded slowly and took my statement. When I got home, I found something new jammed into my mailbox. A bright red envelope with the Canyon Creek logo on the front and the words "Final Payment Notice, Urgent" in block letters. Inside was a bogus invoice, 3 months of unpaid lease dues, late fees, and a penalty for unauthorized occupancy. The total? $9,300. They even had the gall to include a QR code for online settlement options. By noon, I'd installed a new outdoor camera under the eaves and bolted a motion sensor over the driveway. I didn't trust these people not to try something physical. Around 2, I got a call from my old realtor, Melanie. She sounded furious. "Owen, I just got a call from someone claiming to be with the HOA Compliance Board. They asked if I could confirm that you knowingly entered into a 3-year lease agreement back in 2022. They even emailed me a PDF of it. I asked her to forward it. When it came in, I nearly burst out laughing. It was the same forged document, but with a different signature block. This time, they'd added an e-signature timestamp, like that would somehow legitimize it. I opened it in Acrobat, checked the metadata. Rookie mistake. The digital signature had been backdated, but the document itself was created that morning. At 5 p.m., a neighbor came by. Dale, older guy, Vietnam vet, still wore his Marine cap like it was fused to his skull. "You all right, son?" he asked. "Karen and her people have been talking a lot around the cul-de-sac, saying you were squatting here, that the HOA is just reclaiming rental property. Bunch of folks are confused." I told him the truth, showed him the deed. Dale squinted at the paper, nodded, and said, "That woman's been trying to swallow up this side of the block for years. Just no one ever pushed back." I asked him if he'd be willing to say that on record if it came to it. He didn't even blink. Damn right I will. That night, I started building my case, digitizing everything, lining up timestamps, property records, statements. I wasn't just going to defend myself. I was going to expose these bastards like termites in drywall. The HOA wanted a war of paperwork. Fine, let them choke on mine. By the next morning, the war had gone public. It started with a stack of letters, glossy, tri-folded, HOA branded, dropped on doorsteps up and down the block like it was garbage day. Canyon Creek Trails HOA had issued a community information bulletin complete with stock photos of happy families and American flags, warning residents of a non-compliant occupant in the neighborhood. My address was listed by number, along with a passive-aggressive note about respecting the terms of agreed-upon leases and preserving community values. My phone buzzed every hour with texts from neighbors, some confused, some pissed, a few asking if I was really being evicted. A guy I barely knew from 3 houses down asked if I needed help moving. One woman offered to buy my kitchen table if I was getting rid of stuff. That's when I knew this was coordinated. Karen wasn't just trying to screw me legally. She wanted me to be socially evicted before a judge ever got the chance. Exile by gossip. I didn't bite. I printed 200 flyers of my own, complete with a notarized copy of the deed, the county's official zoning map proving I wasn't under HOA jurisdiction, and a link to a Dropbox folder titled Fake Lease and Fraud Documentation, Canyon Creek HOA. Then I walked door to door for 6 blocks, personally handing them out and answering questions. Some neighbors turned cold, some looked embarrassed, some looked ready to throw their HOA letters into the fireplace. But the real game changer came that afternoon. A journalist from the Front Range Sentinel, name was Marla Espinoza, emailed me out of the blue, said she'd seen the flyers and had been following HOA overreach cases in the county for years. This one has all the ingredients, she wrote. Forgery, jurisdictional overreach, early morning confrontation. May I come by for a statement? I told her yes, and we set up a time the next day. Meanwhile, my lawyer, Macy, called with news. They officially filed suit this morning. HOA versus Owen Merritt. Motion for summary eviction and transfer of premises. I squeezed the phone hard enough to feel the plastic creak. They filed under the forged lease. Yep, claiming you're in violation of multiple clauses in the rental agreement, including refusal to vacate after term expiration, failure to adhere to community lawn standards, and unauthorized firearm possession. I barked a laugh. What firearm? She paused. They cited your Glock. The one you mentioned in the police report said firearms aren't allowed in leased properties within HOA bounds. They're referencing a gun I own. In a house, they don't. Exactly. It's nonsense. But nonsense filed in court, which means we respond in court. Macy was already drafting the answer in a motion to stay proceedings until a forensic analysis of the signature could be completed. This is a hit job, Owen. They're trying to steamroll you fast before the ink dries on the evidence. That night, I saw 2 people walking up my driveway. HOA people, same Navy windbreakers from the morning raid. They had a clipboard and a measuring wheel. One of them bent down to mark something in chalk near my mailbox. I opened the front door and stepped out. You've got about 6 seconds to get off my property before I start recording and call the cops. They froze, looked at each other, and backed off fast, mumbling something about compliance perimeter checks. I didn't follow. I didn't need to. The new camera I'd mounted over the garage caught every second in crystal clear 4K. The next morning, Marla showed up with a mic, a notebook, and a face that said she'd seen 100 versions of this crap before. We sat on the porch. I told her everything. The fake lease, the bogus eviction notice, the fabricated dues. Showed her the title chain, the forged signature, the backdated PDF timestamps. She whistled softly. They're good. Not smart, but bold. Bold's one word for it. An hour later, her article went live. Veteran faces illegal eviction by HOA over fake lease. County records tell a different story. By sunset, the online comments were a war zone. Some called for HOA reform. Others insisted I had to be lying. No one tries to steal a house that blatantly. One guy said it reminded him of the old ranch grab cases in Arizona. Someone else linked a Reddit thread titled HOA Horror Stories. This one takes the cake. That night, I checked my porch camera again. A different face this time. Younger guy. Hoodie. No windbreaker. He stood in front of my house for 10 solid minutes just staring at the front door. No movement. No knocking. Then he left. The next morning, I found something new in my mailbox. A second envelope. No HOA branding. Just a single printed sheet. Get out. While you still can. Some rules can't be rewritten. I brought the threat letter to Macy the next morning, still sealed in a plastic evidence bag. She looked at it under the lamp in her office like it was anthrax. "Printed on a cheap home inkjet," she said, sniffing. "No return address, no fingerprints visible, but the language." She tapped the phrase, "Some rules can't be rewritten." "That's a dog whistle, Owen. HOA language. That's how they justify power. Rules are sacred in their little kingdoms." "Do we tell the cops?" "We will. But first, I want to drop something else on their heads." She pulled out a manila envelope and handed it to me. "Meet your new favorite person, Jerome Connolly, forensic document examiner. Just finished his report." I flipped through it. His conclusion was blunt. The signature on the alleged lease agreement does not match verified exemplars of Owen Merritt's authentic signature. The digital e-signature stamp has been artificially backdated using document editing software, with metadata inconsistencies confirming post-fact manipulation. He's willing to testify? Already filed the affidavit with the motion to dismiss. And I'm attaching a counterclaim. I looked at her. For what? Fraud, forgery, harassment, abuse of legal process, attempted unlawful eviction, defamation. We're playing offense now. It felt good to smile for the first time in days. That afternoon, while Macy was filing with the court, I dug into a different angle. I went back through all my closing paperwork from 3 years ago. Every email, signature, scanned PDF. I wanted to find the exact version of my signature they'd used to forge that lease. I didn't have to dig long. There it was, my 2020 mortgage application to U.S. Evergreen Bank, back before I decided to buy in cash instead. I'd withdrawn the application a week later, but the signed digital form was still in my records. And the signature, identical to the one on the forged lease, pixel for pixel. It wasn't just a forgery. It was a lifted signature, cut and pasted from a confidential banking document. I checked the metadata. That PDF had been downloaded 5 times, 4 by me. 1, a week after cancellation, by a bank employee named Gavin Holt. I searched him. Guess who now worked in property compliance at Canyon Creek Trails HOA? I called Macy immediately. "We've got a breach, a data breach. One of the forged documents used a signature pulled directly from my mortgage application at Evergreen. I've got names and timestamps." She whistled. "Now we're talking criminal." That evening, I went hunting, not for people, for paper. I wanted to know why Canyon Creek HOA thought they had any claim to my property in the first place. So I pulled every zoning map, plat file, and district boundary record I could find on the county website. Took hours, but around midnight, I found it. An old map from 2004, when the neighborhood was first subdivided. My parcel, Lot 117A, was clearly marked outside the HOA boundary line. Just a little square on the fringe, untouched, unclaimed, private. But in a 2009 amendment filed by Canyon Creek's developer, there was a proposed boundary expansion that included my lot, labeled Reserve Lot Pending. Pending. It had never been approved. No vote. No record of county acceptance. Just a suggestion. But someone had sat on that idea for over a decade, waiting for a chance to make it real. They'd waited until the last owner moved out. Then they pounced. Karen wasn't trying to evict me from my house. She was trying to activate an old fantasy to finish what the developers never could. I printed everything, marked it up, highlighted every inconsistency in neon yellow. By morning, I had a wall of documents that looked like a conspiracy theorist's dream board, and every line on it led back to the same conclusion. They knew this wasn't their land. They just didn't care. I didn't go to war for the government. I went to war for people who thought no one else would fight for them. I never thought I'd have to fight one on my own soil, in my own house, with documents instead of rifles. But there I was, 5 weeks into this surreal siege, sitting at my kitchen table surrounded by highlighters, manila folders, and a wall of lies, all handcrafted by Karen Sheldon and her army of clipboard commandos. The day after I found the zoning expansion scam, the next assault began. This time it came from my own mailbox. Again. An oversized envelope with Canyon Creek Trails branding, thicker than the last. Inside was a full community compliance packet. It included an updated invoice, now totaling $15,000 in back rent, fees, and ongoing litigation surcharges. A 30-day final demand for vacation of premises, signed by Karen, and notarized by someone who might as well have used a crayon. A color-coded map of the Canyon Creek Trails lease zone, now conveniently extended to cover my property. a note addressed to nearby residents accusing me of refusing peaceful resolution and compromising community harmony. I barely had time to toss the crap into my evidence bin before the next bomb dropped. This time, digital. That morning, I woke up to a dozen missed calls and 29 unread emails. The HOA had sent out a mass newsletter to every homeowner in the district. It accused me of unlawful occupancy, disrupting association governance, and, I swear to God, creating a culture of non-compliance. My face was included in the email as a known violator. It went viral faster than mold on bread. Screenshots ended up on Facebook, Nextdoor, and even a subreddit called Our Ho Nightmares. I got messages from complete strangers, some offering help, some calling me a squatter. One guy asked if I was that rogue veteran taking on the HOA mafia. I didn't know whether to laugh or reload my cameras. Then came the escalation I'd been waiting for. Karen filed a motion to expedite my removal. She was requesting a summary judgment, bypassing full hearings, claiming my continued presence constituted an emergency for the community. Macy filed our response that afternoon, a hard-hitting objection with the full forensic report, the bank, breach evidence, and a new affidavit from Melanie, my realtor, who swore under oath that no lease had ever been signed or discussed. But it didn't stop there. Karen went live, literally. She stood in front of the Canyon Creek Trails Community Center in a red blazer, surrounded by HOA board members and a local real estate attorney, and gave a press conference like she was the governor. Said she was protecting the community from legal ambiguity and acting to preserve cohesion. Called me a procedural squatter exploiting loopholes. Said the HOA was just reclaiming assets held in temporary trust. That same day, Marla from the Sentinel called me in disbelief. "This woman thinks she's running for office," she muttered. We released our own press statement. Macy handled most of it, but I insisted on including one line of my own. If I'm a squatter, then the sun is rented and the air comes with a usage fee. By the end of the week, the court scheduled a full evidentiary hearing. The judge wanted to see everything: the deed, the lease, the zoning, the metadata, the HOA charter. It was official. This wouldn't be dismissed quietly. They wanted a spectacle. Fine. They were about to get one. The hearing was scheduled for a Monday morning at the county courthouse, the kind of stale government building with flickering fluorescent lights and aging wood paneling that smelled like a mix of paper, stress, and overused coffee filters. I arrived early wearing my old dress blues, not because I needed to intimidate anyone, but because I knew Karen would hate it. Macy was already inside, arranging a small war table of exhibits, certified copies of my deed, the full chain of title, the metadata from the forged lease, and 2 expert witness statements. Karen showed up with a crew, matching navy suits, printouts, and plastic folders, and that same smug expression like she'd already won. Her attorney, a wiry man with gelled hair and a Bluetooth headset still in one ear, didn't even look at me. The courtroom was fuller than I expected. A couple of neighbors, a reporter, someone from the zoning board. Maybe they came for the drama. Maybe they came to see if a single man could really stand against a system. The judge, an older man with a patient face and a spine made of cold iron, opened the proceedings with the precision of a man who had no time for theatrics. Karen's lawyer went first. He laid out the HOA's case in a series of painfully rehearsed bullet points: the lease, the expiration, the extended jurisdiction of Canyon Creek Trails, and a printout of their bylaws with a highlighted clause on asset recovery. Then he dropped the forged lease in front of the judge like a mic drop. Macy stood up, calm as a glacier. She started slow, establishing the property's legal history, the full title transfer from the prior owner, notarized and recorded with the county. She explained how I'd purchased the home outright. No mortgage, no escrow account involving the HOA. Then she moved to the forgery. Our first witness was a handwriting analyst from Denver who broke down the signature overlay, the one lifted from my old bank document. She displayed the match side by side on a projector with time-stamped metadata and vector analysis that showed the copied digital curve of my name. Karen squirmed. But the turning point came when we brought in the surprise witness. Macy had found him 2 days before, Daniel Price, a former employee at United Western Bank who'd been fired for selling personal data on the side. He'd been subpoenaed and offered immunity in exchange for a sworn deposition. He admitted that 3 years ago, shortly after my loan application was rejected by that same bank, he'd forwarded a PDF of my file, including my digital signature, to a real estate contact trying to confirm occupancy status. That contact? A woman named Karen Sheldon operating under the email Canyon, HOXXSiteTrails.net. The courtroom went dead silent. Karen's face drained. She leaned over to her lawyer and hissed something under her breath that I couldn't catch, but the judge sure noticed. "Ms. Sheldon," he said, adjusting his glasses, "do you have any rebuttal for this extremely detailed testimony?" She stood up, tried to laugh, and muttered something about community cohesion and how rules are sometimes misunderstood. Then, in a final moment of grandeur, she declared, "I only acted in the best interest of Canyon Creek. These lands should never have been sold outside the association. That house was meant to be common property." That was her defense. Not law, not facts, just entitlement. The judge recessed for the day. No ruling yet, but it was clear the tide had turned. I stepped out into the parking lot and was met by a small crowd of reporters, neighbors, and one guy who just said, "You're the guy, right? The HOA guy?" Yeah, I was the guy. The next morning, I returned to the courthouse running on 3 hours of sleep and 4 shots of espresso. Macy looked more composed, like she already saw the verdict written on the wall. Karen and her entourage, however, walked in with none of the smug energy from the day before. She wore a beige suit this time, no makeup, and avoided looking at anyone. The judge took the bench, adjusted his microphone, and went straight into it. He declared the lease agreement void and fraudulent. He laid out the evidence: signature manipulation, digital forensics, and the testimony from Daniel Price. He emphasized that the HOA had no jurisdiction over my property, that my ownership was fully legal and exclusive, and that the actions taken by Canyon Creek Trails were not just civil violations, but edged into the territory of criminal misconduct. Then, before we could celebrate, he turned his attention to Karen directly. "Ms. Sheldon, this court is compelled to recommend criminal prosecution for your role in the fabrication and use of falsified legal documents, harassment, and attempted unlawful eviction under false pretense." She didn't flinch, but her lawyer closed his folder, stood up, and walked out. No words, just gone. The sheriff's deputy walked over and, without a scene, placed Karen under arrest right there in the courtroom. The cuffs clicked and echoed across the chamber louder than any gavel strike. But it wasn't over. The judge then addressed my countersuit: the defamation, the psychological distress, the costs incurred, and the reputational damage. He awarded me a judgment of $800,000 to be paid by the HOA's remaining operating fund and Karen's personal liability insurance. HOA members in the gallery, some of whom had supported her, others just confused neighbors, broke into murmurs. One older man actually shouted, "You bankrupted us," before storming out. Outside, the courthouse plaza felt surreal. Cameras, reporters. A local NBC affiliate shoved a mic in my face. "How does it feel to bring down an HOA president?" one of them asked. I looked straight into the lens. It wasn't about bringing anyone down. It was about proving that a title deed means something. You can't just fake your way into stealing someone's life. By sunset, the story was already all over local news and Reddit. The HOA was in shambles. Their board resigned en masse that evening. Some residents tried to file a motion to preserve what was left, but without leadership or funds, Canyon Creek Trails was effectively finished. The state HOA regulatory board began its audit the next morning. Macy and I sat on my porch that night. She sipped wine. I had a beer. The eviction notice was still pinned to my fridge, like a trophy. "I think you just made case law," she said. I didn't reply. I just stared at the moon and thought about how absurdly close I came to losing everything to a forged piece of paper. By the end of that week, my mailbox looked like it had been hit by a storm of paperwork, apologies, and letters of concern from residents of Canyon Creek Trails, or what was left of it. The HOA, legally speaking, still existed on paper, but after Karen's arrest and the resignation of the board, it was little more than a husk. The regulatory board opened a formal inquiry that same Friday, and word spread fast that any remaining funds would be frozen pending full forensic audit. Turns out Karen had also been using HOA money for some personal improvement initiatives, like the brand new kitchen she installed last year and a failed attempt to launch a neighborhood wellness retreat that mostly involved buying a bunch of massage chairs, and storing them in her garage. The fallout was nuclear. I wasn't looking to go viral, but the clip of Karen being cuffed in court, captured by a court sketch artist who moonlighted as a TikToker, exploded online. Within 72 hours, I had reporters from 3 major outlets asking for interviews, HOA horror story YouTubers emailing for exclusives, and a property rights podcast that somehow had more listeners than NPR offering me a guest spot. Macy handled the media vultures with the cold precision of a seasoned sniper. You want a statement? Here it is. No comment until the appeals window closes. Privately, though, I kept the recordings. Every damn moment of it, from the door being pounded on at 4:50 a.m. to the bailiff snapping the cuffs. I wasn't interested in fame. I wanted record. I wanted truth backed by timestamps. A week later, I hosted a backyard cookout, just family and a few of the neighbors who'd stuck their necks out for me, or at least didn't join the HOA mob. We grilled ribs, drank too much cheap whiskey, and someone brought a Bluetooth speaker blasting Johnny Cash until midnight. That's when Frank, a retired postman who lived 2 doors down, handed me a battered manila envelope. "I think this used to be yours," he said. Karen gave me this back when she started poking around the neighborhood plans. Told me it was outdated HOA material she was helping clean up. But it's got your name all over it. Inside was a copy of the original zoning waiver filed when the subdivision was created, signed by the county notarized, and dated 12 years ago. It explicitly excluded my parcel from any HOA authority. The copy had been folded, stained, and clearly hidden in someone's drawer for a decade. I scanned it the next day and uploaded it to the property record archive myself, just to make damn sure it was where it belonged. By the end of the month, Karen was indicted on 3 felony counts: forgery, filing false legal claims, and obstruction of justice. Her bond hearing was a quiet affair. No press, no spectacle. The judge looked tired. Karen looked worse. She avoided my gaze when they let her out in shackles. The civil award payout came through 2 weeks after that. After taxes, attorney fees, and a donation I made to the State Property Rights Watchdog Group, I was left with just over $400,000. Enough to finish the renovation I'd started before this circus, build out a workshop, and maybe, just maybe, finally install the hot tub I kept putting off. But more than the money, what I got back was peace. No more notices on the door. No more random inspections. No more HOA newsletters slid passive-aggressively into my mailbox. My driveway was mine. My land was mine. My future was mine. I replaced the gate sign with a new one. Black steel letters, bold font, laser cut by a buddy of mine who owed me a favor. Private property not subject to HO trespassers will be educated a little dramatic? Maybe, but I earned it. One morning, I caught a pair of city workers in a pickup slowing down outside the fence. They weren't from the HOA, just reading the sign, laughing. One of them took a picture and gave me a thumbs up. That felt better than the court win, if I'm honest. By the time the leaves turned gold and orange, the neighborhood looked different, quieter, a little emptier. Several houses had gone up for sale, some out of shame, others out of sheer inconvenience after the HOA collapse. Property values dipped briefly, but no one could argue with the principle of what happened. One man, one forged lease, one massive miscalculation. I got a letter from Karen's husband, a real one, handwritten, apologizing for her, for the stress, for the lies. Said he was filing for divorce and leaving the state. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Later that fall, I gave a talk at a real estate law seminar in Denver. Macy came with me and introduced me as the guy who taught an HOA what private property really means. I got a standing ovation, 3 offers to write a book, and 1 very enthusiastic handshake from a guy who said his own HOA was next. But for me, the legacy of this whole disaster wasn't a courtroom victory or a viral clip. It was the quiet. It was being able to walk my land at sunrise, coffee in hand, dog at my heels, with no clipboard-wielding Karen breathing down my neck. It was a house that finally felt like home.